live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. It is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime. Coming to you from the COE's computer today because I have been locked out of the studio. Not once today, but twice. And I have keys. They just don't work. So I don't know what the word is. What's the word? We do what we need to do to get things done. And that's what we're doing. So we're coming to you from Studio 1B. So there you go. Studio 1B, which is not too far from Studio 1A, which is global headquarters. It was another dramatic day in the United States versus Sean Diddy Combs, ex-assistant Mia, who's going under that pseudonym without her first or last name necessarily being revealed. She talked about tracking devices, how Sean Diddy Combs would use tracking devices. Sounds a lot like one of two things, either the FBI and law enforcement or mobster-style activity. She also talked about how Sean Diddy Combs would steal her phone, others' phones, including Cassie Ventura's, and just basically a culture of silence. The trial now is actually turning to a bit of a critical question. Is the defense's back so far up against the wall? Will Sean Diddy Combs have to take the stand in his own defense? We're going to discuss that tonight. We've got our best guest. She's been a show favorite. She is the professor, University of Nebraska, Professor Emrita at the University of Nebraska School of Law. Joe Potuto is a friend, a one-time STS Nationer, still is. She still watches, and she transitioned into being one of our best guests. So thank you for being here. Lauren Conlon, she is been in the courtroom each and every day of this trial from day one. A friend of mine, friend of the show, and you can find her as a contributing reporter to Nancy Grace, but she's a investigative reporter in her own right. And she did 60 episodes on the Grant Solomon case, which I didn't know when I did that show. Otherwise, I would have called Lauren. But she told me when we were hanging out in court, and Lauren's doing live hits every day from the courthouse. Last, certainly not least, and a first-time best guest is John Day. He is a distinguished trial attorney and a legal expert with more than 2 decades of experience in criminal defense, civil rights, litigation, and government misconduct. He is the founder of the John Day Law Office in Santa Fe, New Mexico. John also served as a deputy district attorney, so he's got prosecutorial experience. Lauren, I've got to start with you. I saw you week one, then I had to get back. Otherwise, my kids wouldn't have talked to me or knew who I was anymore. How has the mood changed or not? I know John was saying he's going to be in New York tomorrow. Is it fairly easy? I mean, it was a mad rush. We were hiring line waiters for us, which I didn't even know existed. Have things calmed down now in downtown Manhattan, or is it still the same sort of circus atmosphere?
Yes, things have been, I would say, pretty calm today, the last couple of days last week. It got crazy when Kid Cudi took the stand. I mean, that was something we all knew was going to happen. But I think that, with the government announcing the witnesses a day or two before, that gives everybody an idea of whether or not they want to come bum rush the courthouse or not. But I think for this week, since we just finished Mia, and we are supposed to hear the last and final survivor victim, who is going by Jane, either Wednesday or Thursday, I expect that it might get a little more crowded then. But tomorrow, I think we're going to hear from somebody that worked at the Intercontinental Hotel. We may hear from someone that has experience in, I don't know what you call it, I guess, forensic experience in altering videos. We're going to focus on the CNN video. And one of Cassie's friends named Brianna is supposed to take the stand.
Yeah, and just real quickly, by the way, Lauren's only with us for another 30 minutes. She has to hop off at 40 minutes after the hour. And I started a bit late, so I'm going to throw her a few questions, especially since she's been there. But as it relates to this, video forensic digital expert, whatever we refer to this expert as, what does the government want to sort of set straight with this particular witness? Do we know?
Well, we're not sure yet. I walked in this morning when they were just discussing some evidentiary stuff. And one thing I heard from the defense that I think is really important to them is that the video is completely unaltered. They made some comments about how there were certain points in the video that were sped up. And this wasn't necessarily on purpose. It's just the way the video came out. It's older. And I think some of the video that we're seeing was taken on a cell phone. You remember that. One of the security guards took it from his phone. So it goes through all these different stages, and they want to ensure that when the jury sees it during deliberations, it's raw. And that's that. So I think that's the main concern. They want to see what possibly could have been altered, what wasn't altered, and yeah, just to make sure that this crucial piece of evidence is honest.
Yeah, it's quite the crowd of characters that were in the courtroom. At least when I was there, I think Lauren and I both know the person I'm talking about that would like to be disruptive. Is she still around?
The MTA lady. If you can believe it, Joel, literally, this is just like gossip, I guess, but I'm starting to feel bad for her because I don't know if she necessarily has a job. I mean, she wears her MTA stuff, but I heard from one of the other reporters that she doesn't work there anymore. So I don't know, but she definitely makes quite a scene, and it takes a lot for these guys to throw you out. So the fact that, they haven't thrown her out yet, it kind of says a lot. But
New York's tough enough as it is. And you've got these characters who are in there. A final question to Lauren for now, and then I'm going to go around the horn here and get the legal experts' advice. But the jurors, what do you make of the jurors so far? Cakespoo comes to us from the other side of the world, New Zealand, I believe. It's either Australia or New Zealand. Sorry, Cakespoo. But whichever country she's in, far from us, she said that I guess she's been hearing that the jurors are passing notes and snickering a little bit. What do you make of the jurors? You get a sense of what they're thinking so far.
Yeah, I mean, the jurors, I would say up until a few days ago, they've been pretty tough to read, pretty stoic. There's been this one woman, kind of in the, well, I won't just, whatever. One woman in particular, she had the same kind of half smirk on her face during the cross-examination of Don Richard that she wore on her face during the cross-examination of Mia. I know that there have been reports that they were laughing. They were laughing during a sidebar that I saw. They were kind of talking to each other. And so I don't know if that had to do with anything that was going on the stand, but there was laughter, during a break. And I would say that there's one man that really looks perplexed at all times. He's got this perplexed look on his face. There's another man that reads all of the documents on the screen. I mean, just zeroes in on those documents, will not take his eyes off of them. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, this one woman, I think she's probably middle-aged, maybe my age. I would say she's the one to watch. She's really the only one that kind of shows it on her face. And it's not even that drastic in my opinion. But however, the public section of the courtroom has a much better view of the jurors than the press section does.
And perplexed man, is he younger or older? We saw someone that appears to be, I guess elderly or heading there, and then a bunch of younger guys.
Yeah, so there are only 3 people on the jury that are under 40. The rest of the ages are 60s, 70s, and a handful, I think, in their mid 50s as well. But this guy, I would probably say in his 40s. And if I had to guess, I would say that deliberations, it's going to be sort of a generational battle here because the ages are so drastic and because of a lot of the evidence we're seeing. And I know you'll probably get into it, but just certain comments from Mia where she's showing all these posts from Instagram with, saying, "Oh, I love you" to Diddy, like love Diddy, love him so much. He's so inspirational. He's so amazing. And she's being called out for this. And her answer is, well, in 2013, Instagram was the place that you lied about your life. Everybody had to pretend like they had a better life than the next person. It's all about impressing people. I'm not sure a certain generation will pick up on that. I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe they will, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Did I freeze? I don't know if I froze or.
You're okay.
I'm okay.
Yeah,
All
I think
right.
I think you froze, but I think it might be on my.
I think it's Joel that's having the
It might be
difficulty.
me because it's a Monday. And
You know, it's Monday for us
can you hear
too.
me?
Yeah, it's Monday. God.
It's Monday for everybody.
Yeah, poor Joel.
It's going to be a long night. So if you can hear me, so John Day, if you can hear me,
Yes.
and if you can, I guess the show is over. You guys can just talk for a while. But John, these, everyone is questioning the same thing. Can the government prove these RICO charges?
Yeah.
They think they're okay with the sex trafficking, but the RICO charges, after talking to 4,973 attorneys, I still don't fully understand it. So you want to take a stab at trying to explain it to me, and what you think they've done so far, the government, in terms of proving the RICO part of this?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key question. And that's the question I've had from the start is, RICO, it's great if you're doing, I suppose, a mob prosecution or some type of, generally recognized organized crime outfit. It's when you try to get creative, I think, as a prosecutor, and you get outside the box that the RICO came in, that it's difficult, because they've got to be able to pin this business enterprise as the hook for the RICO charge. And they may have that in there just as a throwaway to make sure the jury comes back on the sex trafficking. But I mean, RICO's tough to understand. You said you talked to all those lawyers and you still don't get it. I mean, you're not alone. I think a lot of lawyers say they understand RICO, but when it comes down to actually charging it and prosecuting it, I mean, it's a lot easier to defend that in this particular case, I think, than to pursue it. But you've got to be able to use that business enterprise of his as the key to get in the door. And I think that's tough. I haven't seen that. That may be where the jury decides we've got him on these other things, and RICO's a little hard to understand.
Yeah. And Joe Potuto, the professor, as I like to call her, you want to just pick up on that? So even John Day is making me feel a little bit better that after the 4,729 attempts, I don't fully get RICO. From what I've heard from other legal minds is that they seem to be definitely making a dent in the sex trafficking, which, is force, fraud, and coercion. And they have to prove one of those, I guess, three pillars. But I mean, you're the professor. So what's happening here on the RICO front? Are they getting anywhere, or where they need to be getting?
I think they are. Whether they've gotten the whole way is a different question. RICO requires an enterprise. It requires that the individual charged be a member or a leader of the enterprise. It has to be an enterprise that's engaged in, there's a list of crimes. It can be RICO predicate acts. And, it's clearly, and John's exactly right, it was enacted to get after the mafia. In fact, Robert Blakey, who was the Cornell law professor, who was the principal drafter, he actually named the act the way he did, the Racketeering Influenced Corrupt Practices Act, so he could get an Italian sounding name as the acronym for the statute. But in the past, I don't know, I'd say many years, federal prosecutors have expanded its use into a variety of other areas, and the courts have defined enterprise pretty broadly in terms of what it takes to show that you're a part of a criminal organization. It's a pretty broad definition. So I think they have a real shot at it. It depends on, obviously everything always depends on the jury. It'll depend on what the jury decides at the end, whether they think the acts that Diddy was involved in were really part of an overall criminal scheme as compared to him being a crazed predator, doing things for his gratification.
Yeah. By the way, I said no more Lori Vallow, no mas. That was Roberto Duran's famous line. And right when I say that, Lori Vallow gets wheeled into the courtroom today pending her next trial. So I might have to pick that up, because now it could go from crazy to like DEFCON 10 crazy with Lori Vallow.
I think you'll have a difficulty. I watched her yesterday, I think genuinely failing to understand a simple explanation from the judge. And it went for a very long time. So
I mean,
I'm
yeah, I don't want to make light of it,
on
but
Friday.
it could be interesting to watch together. So, Teen Bean, just back to John Day for a minute. John, Teen Bean saying to me, what is not to get about Rico? These people all work for him, and everything he does is illegal. I mean, we have heard about guns. We've heard about him trying to go after Suge Knight. We've heard about him basically firebombing, although there's no direct evidence here, but the implication is that it was him with Kid Cudi's car. We've heard about the sex trafficking, all these other things. I mean, it sounds like he's running a criminal enterprise. Is that enough?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to come. Also, I'd like to see the jury instructions too on RICO.
Yeah.
Because that's always where, you get a juror who's confused, or two or three. That's always the critical point. But I mean, yeah, they have presented a solid case trying to establish that. I'm always skeptical when it comes down to, I mean, I think everybody understands RICO in the context of a criminal, organized crime, the classic example. But is this enough of a hook for the continuing racketeering organization, or are they going to confuse some of the jurors? The other stuff is much easier to digest, I think, in terms of the trafficking. But RICO, RICO may be a sticking point.
Yeah. Lauren, to you, tracking devices Mia talked about today. The fact that Sean Diddy Combs, I guess in an effort to control, would just steal her cell phone, not steal, take away cell phones. I guess it's sort of stealing since they're theirs. Would take away Cassie's cell phone. I guess you get two reactions. You get the reaction within the courtroom when you're in the overflow room. I don't think in the regular courtroom. I'm sure it's much different. But at least in the overflow room, you get the court of public opinion reaction. But when she was talking about that, specifically the tracking devices, did the ears of the jurors perk up? And what are your thoughts on this RICO and racketeering side of things? Because it does seem, who else puts tracking devices on cars? I mean, it's mob-like figures and law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where did you see, was this like a headline somewhere? Because the tracking thing, that was very much, and this is what we talk about in the courtroom with other reports. Like, we're constantly like, we heard this, but it wasn't a big deal at the time. And then you go outside and you see a headline, something that was kind of like in passing, and it's the story. So in terms of this, we heard Mia say this about Cassie. It was kind of, I think there was even an objection because Cassie didn't testify to this herself. I mean, you were there too. I never heard her say that.
No,
there was
I didn't.
Right. There's a tracking device on her car. And so that, there's been a lot of objections to what Mia says in terms of Cassie, because, it's not what Cassie thinks, it's what Mia thinks. And no one knew about this tracking device, and Cassie didn't bring it up herself. So, I'm not really sure. That was definitely in passing. I don't think anyone really paid too close attention to that, I guess, for today anyway, just because the cross-examination today was a little bit tedious, let me tell you. And, I'm sure John can appreciate, like, the problem was the form of the questions. And Brian Steele was asking these questions with improper form. The objections were one after another, and he wasn't thinking fast enough on his feet to get the right question out. So it was just a jumbled mess. I think that everybody wanted to just get through at one point. But in terms of like the RICO and the sex trafficking, I'm so excited to be on with you, Dr. Joe and Joel and John, because I also have questions. I guess my question on the sex trafficking aspect is, how are 12 jurors going to unanimously agree that Cassie Ventura was commercially sex trafficked when we've seen evidence and text messages of, let's say, and I know you have an explanation from an expert as to why she testified she liked it and all of that stuff, but I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that she would do these freak offs and then they would parlay that into a beautiful vacation in Mexico where she seemed to be enjoying herself. And there's no aftermath of any of these freak offs where she wasn't, supposed to be enjoying herself, or the escorts that testify that she was enjoying herself. And I don't want anyone to get mad at me about this. I'm just repeating what I've seen on the stand. I'm trying to figure out how these jurors are going to unanimously agree on this stuff. And additionally, in terms of the RICO stuff, I also feel like we've heard an explanation from the defense where, Dr. Joe, as you said, it's up to the jury. Well, it's always up to the jury. I feel like in this case, it really is what the jury thinks. For example, if they truly believe that Diddy extorted Cassie's mother for this 20 grand to not release the sex tapes, even though we didn't see the bank records, we didn't see any type of communication, and he gave it back. If they think that's extortion by definition, then there you go. But if they're like, well, he gave it back, we didn't see any of these records, right? I mean, that's where I'm just like, I don't think it's going to be as black and white as some people think it is, if that makes sense. And I have a lot of questions, and it's week 4.
Yeah. By the way, Lauren Conlon is a great investigative reporter, and she does reporting for Nancy Grace. Real quick, Lauren, before I get back to John and the professor, what's the GOAT Nancy Grace's take on all this? She's got to be annoyed with Sean Diddy, I would assume.
Oh, yes. She is enough is enough. I mean, as you know, Nancy is very victim survivor centered, and it's amazing. And she is looking at this case with a prosecutor's background, of course. She has a lot of defense attorneys that she puts on the show, but yeah, I mean, she is definitely very pro prosecution, and she thinks they have a really strong case.
Is she still calling him Cuff Daddy?
Oh yeah, I mean, her names, oh my gosh, are so good. I remember during Halloween, she called it Diddy Ween. I was dead. I was like, Diddy Ween? Like, what? She's funny.
I wore my itty bitty Diddy shirt the other day, Lauren. I'll send you a
God.
Moving on, though, from there to John Day, who is a refined gentleman on a show that's not so refined. One of the things that Lauren mentioned was Brian Seal today, who's a very, very savvy criminal defense attorney. And it's kind of like a unique juxtaposition, because when Cassie Ventura had to be crossed, there was a lot of talk about, well, how do you do this? She's a government star witness. She's been to hell and back. She's a real victim here. And they had a woman cross-examine. But now the gloves are kind of off, even though this is another alleged victim here, Mia, on the stand. And I think on multiple occasions, and Lauren can correct me if I'm wrong, he got an admonition from the judge, who basically said, watch your tone with this witness. Is that problematic? I mean, you don't want the jurors to think that you're not a nice human being. And by the way, I talked to him. He's a very nice guy, but he's doing his job.
He's doing his job. That's one of the toughest things is if you are a defense lawyer cross-examining a victim on the stand, a witness like that in that situation, whether you're male or female. I mean, I know the strategy of how you do it, but my experience at this point in a trial, these jurors have probably made up their minds about how they feel about the lawyers. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to bleed over into a verdict, but every post-jury interviews are so valuable, and I do them every time, and I learn something. You obviously learn a lot more from the trials you lose than the ones you win, because when you win, you think you're the best lawyer. But the juror interviews are very helpful. They give you a sense of at what point in the trial did I lose you? What point in the trial did you suddenly think, I don't like this guy or this woman? And that colors the rest of the trial for you. So that may be one of those inflection points that was so, watching a judge admonish a lawyer, the jurors identify with the judges. The jurors think the judges are their friend. And when they see a judge punishing one of the lawyers, they make a mental note of that. So it's inevitable, and you got to do it. Everybody goes through it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be fascinated to see at what point did they, for example, turn on one set of lawyers or the other.
Yeah.
Joel, do you mind if I just clarify? The jury wasn't in the room for
the
judge.
Oh
yeah, and that it only came up, and I'm sorry to interrupt, when there was a break. We were coming back from the break. The jury wasn't in the room yet, and neither was Mia. The government, Maureen Comey, stood up and actually said, I want this on the record because I don't think the transcript is going to reflect what's happening here. And then she said, it is very clear that Mr. Steele is doing this humiliating cross-examination and hostile cross-examination to Mia, and he's yelling at her. This is what Maureen Comey said. And she said, this is going to affect our cases in the future. If a victim is treated like this, no other victims are going to want to come forward and be put on the stand. And actually, the judge said, I haven't heard Mr. Steele yell at Mia. You know, he's doing his job of cross-examining her. I will sustain all of the objections you have. However, Mr. Steele, it sounds like you're trying to kind of pull the wool over on us with your questioning form, because you're not fixing your form. You're just trying to get it out there so the jury hears it. So he did get a slap, but it wasn't necessarily for treating her in a hostile way, even though he kind of was.
The jurors pick up on all the subtleties, all the communications between the judge and the lawyers, and the attitude. And it's always fascinating to know, when did that shift? When did that happen?
And the prosecutor, I mean, the prosecutor could have said something in front of the jury on the record, not to the extent she said it to the judge when the jury wasn't there, and made a point of directing the jury's attention to it, combined with the judge doing something that seemed to agree. So I think the prosecutor there was acting in a pretty responsible way, not to make that part of what the jury saw or understood. Laura, I have a question for you, and that you've sat in from the beginning, and I've watched intermittently. What my question is, the evidence in which Cassie seemed to be cooperating voluntarily or enjoying, or whatever verb you want to put in there, seemed to come more in the first few years of her relationship with Diddy than it did towards the end. Is that right? Or was it throughout?
I think it was throughout, but we've followed this journey of their relationship, I think, and we've been told at this point through multiple witnesses that they were on again, off again. And even when Cassie was dating Kid Cudi, and Joel, you were there for this testimony, I believe, she actually said when Diddy found out about her and Kid Cudi, she was finishing up a freak off. So it's been a lot to kind of take in as to how this relationship worked. I mean, it's very clear that she was groomed, very clear that she loved him so much that she would have done anything for him, even things she didn't necessarily want to do. But it's just been, it's tough to follow the year after year thing and try. I mean, that's been a big point of contention. And I think a lot of the objections, it's like, what time period is this? When is this? Because it's over a decade. And, but yeah, I think it's been kind of throughout. She had these on again, off again periods that we saw where she would stick up for herself, and then maybe she'd pull back a bit. But one thing we did see is when she did say maybe she wasn't feeling the freak offs, she kind of explained it in a way that she didn't necessarily not want to do them because she didn't want to be with the escorts, but it was because Diddy stopped spending time with her alone after. Joel, do you remember that? It was like an email or a text where, she kind of looked forward to the time she had with him alone after the escort. And he got so busy at one point that he just kind of said, okay, we're done after the escort. And she wasn't getting that one-on-one attention that she wanted from him. It's so sad. It's like, it's just horrible to sit in the courtroom and know what it's like to be, even Mia, like, I'm a people pleaser. I had bosses that would be horrible to me, and I would still be like, sorry, even though I know it's not my fault, but I'm sitting in a federal courtroom. And I know that this testimony alone is not what's going to get him convicted. So I'm looking at it from that aspect as well. So that's why this case is just so hard.
Yeah, it really is. Violet, and that was a great kind of description of what's been going on. Violet says perpetrators are skilled in distorting what true love is. John Day, to you, I mean, in the courtroom today, one of the things that Brian Steele did, and you'd expect him to do, is he went back in time through text messages. And some of these text messages came after Mia had, I think, returned 3 different times. Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, to the job. And look, I believe she was getting health care. She was definitely getting a salary. She had the the street cred of working for a guy who's one of the biggest hip hop artists in the world. So Brian Steele starts reading some of these text messages that are from 2018 to 2019, which is after I think the third time she returns. And she says things like "Merry Christmas, love you so much, thinking of you, nightmare about R. Kelly, trapped in the elevator, you save me, sending you all the love in the world." Yeah, she was talking about a situation when I guess she was in the elevator with R. Kelly. And she explained, and I quote here, "Puff used to be my protector." And she admits, and I quote again, "I was still under his grip psychologically." So, John, my question is, and there was a domestic violence expert, the same one from the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, testified, but there are going to be people that don't understand the intricacies of domestic violence, abusive relationships, and they're going to say to themselves, why did this woman go back 3 different times? Why did Cassie stay with him for 11 years? So how does the government circumvent that? And how do you know if the jurors are going to, understand this?
Right. Well, Steele was making the points he has to make, but look, everybody on that jury, whether they're conscious of it or not, knows somebody, probably a woman, who has been in a relationship that has some elements of what's been presented so far. It may not be that it's that extreme, obviously, but I think in the back of every juror's mind, subconsciously or not, they're going to be thinking, I know someone, it's a relative, it's a friend, it's a neighbor, at that level who had some type of relationship. And how did they deal with that? Did they, were they sort of strong superwoman and stopped it right away? Or were they so caught up? And that's what the experts explain in terms of victims of domestic violence and sexual violence, how they process that, how they, sure, from a distance, armchair quarterbacking is easy to say, well, you should have gotten out of there. You should have said something. Why didn't you say something? The fact that you didn't say something means that you really were going along for the ride. And that's what the experts will say. That's just not the case. It's the psychological web. It's very dark. It's very deep, and it's very hard to break that. And that's what the government is going to be hoping that the jurors, coming from their own personal experiences, will say, I know someone, probably a woman, who's been in a situation that had some element of that. And I know it was hard for her to get out of that and to do the things that from a distance, you could say you should have done.
Yeah.
And let me add that that's some of the way the state's closing argument will go. Because what's going to happen is the government is going to have to connect all these elements and present a picture of what occurred that is compelling with the jury. And if you combine that with witnesses on the stand who seem credible in their explanations of how they could have gotten caught up in it, how they could have written a Christmas card, how they could have gone back a second time, that's what will persuade a jury.
Yeah, you see Wesley John Holmes here, the Aussie living in Tokyo, which I love to say, which is why I say it. It's a fair question, Joel. I wouldn't buy it, but some may. He's a guy in his, I'll say, early 40s, Wesley, just to be nice to you. But, you just don't know who's going to buy this, who's not. Graciela Grace, who comes to us from Australia, she apparently just had surgery and is recuperating. We're a big family here at STS, so I hope you're recovering well, and we are all thinking of you. Canine Catherine saying that is not the way it works. I think most people know that. So, and that's to John's point that most jurors will know somebody, if not all, that have been through a somewhat similar situation, which is sad but true. Professor, back to you. This notion of jury nullification, it could be that we're doing all of this and that Lauren has been schlepping to court every day. It's like going to, I heard John say he's going to be in New York tomorrow and he wants to go. Well, John, it's like going to Chicago O'Hare over Christmas time. You better get ready to take that belt off. Shoes can stay on, but it's
my shoes can't, Joel. My shoes I have to take them off every day. So
well, Colin, I don't wear stilettos to court, but maybe that's the difference. But, yeah, you're going through quite the security line there, John Day. But my point is, Professor, we might be doing all of this, and there might be what is termed jury nullification. There could be a Sean Combs fan on this panel of jurors that we just don't know about, who's just not going to be swayed no matter what. And that could be the one juror who's like, yeah, I'm not voting guilty here. Are you you don't appear to be concerned since you just rolled your eyes at me.
Did I? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to roll my eyes.
Not at me, but I get what you're saying.
I'll say two things about it. There could be a juror who is going to, and Lauren talked about this, who is going to be persuaded by some of the evidence enough to have a reasonable doubt. That's not jury nullification. That's assessing the witnesses and the evidence and coming to a different conclusion. And you bring your own perspective and your own background into doing it. So maybe a fan would be more inclined to do it. But if we're talking about straight jury nullification, I believe everything, but I'm a fan. I'm not going to vote to convict. I don't believe it. I mean, the stuff he was doing was so horrific and so degrading to women and so terrible that I just can't imagine a fan in the world that would say that's okay because, boy, I like him as a performer.
Yeah. Lauren Collins got to run, but Lauren, real quick before in 10 seconds or however much time you have, is Sean Diddy Combs going to take the stand because of where he's at here? Any chance in hell Mark Agnifilo or Brian Steele lets him get up there and then opens the proverbial doors, which we'll get into with John and the professor in a minute?
I would say definitely not. And I believe specifically because of the Kid Cudi testimony, I think that the arson investigator, the LAPD officer paired with Capricorn Clark and Kid Cudi himself, that was some of the strongest testimony that we've seen thus far. So strong, in fact, that the defense moved for a mistrial, although it wasn't necessarily because of that. It was because of some government line of questioning. But I think that if he got up there right now, there is some doubt as to whether or not he is technically responsible for the Molotov cocktail. I mean, look, we all can agree most likely that it was him. However, again, there's some doubt left over. If he's on the stand, you better believe the government's going to be like, okay, did you, number one, break into Kid Cudi's house? Great. Number two, did you have somebody throw a Molotov cocktail? I mean, that is like, for me, that would be it. It's point blank, yes or no. And that would tie to the RICO charge. So I'm going to say no, but
Flora says Lauren is the only person Nancy Grace doesn't yell at till she's late right now because of me. Real quick, outside of Cassie is what reporters do. I push my luck, but outside of Cassie, who do you think's been the strongest witness?
Oh goodness. I mean, I honestly think that Capricorn Clark gave really, really good direct testimony that really seemed to help, again, the RICO charge because of the arson and the break-in. She was there for both of them, as well as some very severe beatings of Cassie. Her testimony, the direct testimony, I had to fight back tears when she talked about Cassie being kicked on the ground over and over in a fetal position because she was with Kid Cudi. And then that made some of her other testimony a bit more credible. However, during cross, she really backed up on something she said during direct that I was shocked at. Agnifilo, I think it was Agnifilo that got out of her that somebody else could have actually been on the phone line when she called Cassie and Kid Cudi from the car when Diddy was breaking in. She actually at the beginning said, nope, there's no one else on the phone. It was just me and Cassie and Kid Cudi. And then all of a sudden in the middle of that testimony, she said, oh, wait, maybe Lauren London was on the phone after all. So I thought she was so strong right up until that. I was like, oh, but then after thinking about it, I was like, okay, I still think she was good paired with the arson investigator and the LAPD officer. So I would say Capricorn is one of the strongest for me. But yeah, now, sorry, that was long-winded. Or Joel's frozen. And I was like, oh, I made him stop. He's so.
You've done it twice.
I'm the one buffering. My apologies. I'm not in the studio. Lauren, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. It was nice to meet everybody. Thanks
Same
again.
here.
Bye.
Same here.
Bye. Well, we'll just talk amongst ourselves, I guess.
Oh, is he?
Oh,
He's
there's
up.
Lauren.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Lauren's point was good. He's not going to tell.
I'm frozen up here. Hopefully this. Apologies, everybody. If you can hear me, John, we've got storms going on. The COE is telling me to take my camera off, which I'm going to do for a minute. Sandy, take the camera off.
Take the camera off.
All right. And there you go. You get to look at the COE. That's going to help with the Wi-Fi. COE, by the way, John is the chief of everything. So, John, let's talk. Let's get into this a little bit. What are the chances that Sean Diddy Combs actually gets up there and takes a stand?
Lauren's right. He's not going to. If there are any jurors if there's any hope of any of the jurors hanging this jury, the only way to preserve that hope is if he does not testify. I mean, of course, the prosecutors are praying that he will, right? But there's nothing he can do on the witness stand that can help him, and everything else he would do would hurt him.
And apologies, this is a disaster, but we're working through. We're used to disasters. But if you're hearing me, yeah. So
Wait for me to leave, and then you can turn the camera off.
COE is in here giving me direction. I mean, where would we have to get to? What point for Brian Steele and Mark Agnifilo to say, okay, you got to get up there? How would they reach that point if they ever were to reach that point?
I can't even comprehend of that. There's nothing at all. I mean, it's not even with his back up against the wall. There's nothing that he could do that would explain away any of the testimony, and it would just be a complete disaster. I guess I could be wrong, but I can't imagine that him taking the stand would have any positive effect.
Yeah, I agree. And Joel, I don't see that. I mean, they've had their biggest witnesses in already. So it's very hard to believe that somebody would still be testifying that could make this so much worse that they decide there's nothing left to do. The only reason why I could see him testify is if he completely ignores lawyer advice and decides he knows better and he's the egotistical lawyer and he thinks he can charm the jury. But I cannot imagine any circumstance in which the lawyers would advise him to take the stand.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, can I say it's been 30 years since law school, but I still get nervous when I'm facing a law professor. So,
I guess we do our job very well, huh?
a lot of PTSD here. So,
John, you're not the only one. We've got Tim Jansen been practicing 40 years, and he says the same thing. I never went to law school, and I don't know. Joe's pretty cool, but I think if I was in there, maybe I'd be a little more nervous if I was a former student myself. But I am not getting political. This is a fact here. President Trump was asked about this, and this is very important. By the way, I think I can get myself back on. There we go. I'm sure people prefer to look at the COE than me. But President Trump was asked about this the other day, and he said he would consider a pardon for Sean Diddy Combs. I said this earlier today when I did the morning wrap up. I think that's a major mistake if he does it. And 50 Cent has jumped in, believe it or not. We're talking about some, I don't know, Twilight Zone type scenarios. But 50 Cent, who loves to troll Sean Diddy Combs, and there's no love lost, said he would appeal to Donald Trump to say no way. But I mean, Joe Potuto, I think that's in some ways political suicide, but Donald Trump does a lot of things that could be characterized that way. But that is a possibility.
Yeah. Well, I would hope it isn't. I think the use of the pardon power in maybe the last 5 or 6 years by presidents, and certainly in the last 4 months, is completely reprehensible. Pardon power was supposed to be used as an exceptional a thing that a president would do in an unusual circumstance, and using it as a kind of a super appeal after the amount of money that a state or the federal government puts into the prosecution, the amount of time and effort and witnesses' time and efforts, to be using it, as frequently as it has been used and for reasons that I do not see are particularly substantial. So having said that, I think it would be completely out of bounds to use it in a case of this defendant, given the allegations against him, the witnesses that came forward, and I think it would have just a terrible effect on victims of this sort of violence and this sort of conduct in other cases. It's enough of an obstacle that they're afraid of going forward because they're afraid of the defendant, they're afraid of, the impact they think their reputation will take, jobs they might get, the risk that the prosecution would end up in an acquittal or a hung jury. And then if you have to add on to that, the president would just wipe it all out by a pardon. It seems to me it's completely indefensible.
Yeah, he just pardoned. I don't watch reality TV, but over the reality TV stars, but I think that was a financial crime. I mean, this is a much different type of crime. John Day, do you see a scenario where the president steps in and after all this pardons Sean Diddy Combs? We've seen stranger things.
The timing of this just made me kind of depressed and sad about the concept. This trial is not over, but there's still evidence being presented. And right, the jurors are supposed to be immune from any discussion, any outside influence. But when you have the president of the United States saying, this is something that I will take a look at, why do that? Why not let the system play out? I understand his concerns about the system, and we've heard that, but this is not political. It's not anything that had been on the radar of politics before. I mean, this is you've got victims who are looking for justice. You've got a defendant who's looking for a defense. I mean, this is not the time to be talking about pardons. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, if we lose, we're going to appeal, but this is not that.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of the timing. It came up and someone pointed out, he said he would look at all the facts, not necessarily a pardon per se, but it's a bit premature for that. Anyway, you look at it. John, just back to you. So one of the witnesses late in the day is basically like a custodian of records for the Intercontinental, which is where this horrific video was shot, which was then leaked to CNN, the 2016 Cassie Ventura video. And it basically, this person just got up there to say, yeah, Cassie Ventura had the ability to charge to the room, that there was this oil damage from now infamous bottles of baby oil and other types of lubricants. What is the purpose, I guess, in a witness like this, sandwiched between, two accusers and two victims who allege that Sean Diddy Combs did these horrible things, because we're now hearing that Jane Doe could testify as soon as Wednesday.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, these are witnesses without a dog in the fight, so the jurors are going to see them as credible. They're just establishing that that these witnesses, the previous witnesses, and all the other evidence is accurate. That I'm from the hotel. I'm not partial to either side. Here's what the hotel looked like. Here's what we had to do. It's just bolstering a certain number of facts. The other thing that's interesting, I think tomorrow, one of the hotel witnesses, I guess the security guys, testifying under an immunity agreement. And I think that's pretty interesting. It should be helpful to the prosecution, I think, at that point.
Yeah. Joe Potuto, to you, Mia on the stand today, again, another accuser, basically talked about, this is a direct quote, "I just knew his power and his wrath." We've heard other victims like Cassie and Capricorn Clark talk about how his eyes would turn black and kind of roll around in his head. But when she talks about his power specifically, does that start to hit at the RICO charges? I mean, is there anything? I mean, the innuendo is there that it was this enterprise and she was sort of stuck within this criminal enterprise. But that's, it's sort of an offhanded comment. And I guess what is the dividing line? I mean, can the jurors take a statement like that and then, I guess, deduce that, this was some sort of criminal enterprise that's bigger than just Sean Diddy Combs?
Well, they can use any piece of evidence that comes in to draw the conclusion that it was bigger than he is and that he was running an enterprise that was done more than just, one evil person, using people to his own gratification, both sexual and deviant, but not doing it in the context of an enterprise. I'm not sure her saying, I just knew he had the power would run to that. I suppose you could draw that inference from it. Sounded to me just like, he's the big dog in town, and I'm just one person caught up in this. And what kind of, ability am I going to be able to have to confront him? I mean, you hear equivalent, thinking of different quotes in some of the other trials. The trial of who's the movie producer? I'm blanking on his name, but one of his victims said, here I am, one actress, one person who hasn't done anything, and he's running a studio, what, how can I get any kind of leverage against him that anybody would believe? That comment sounds more like that to me, but it's all of the testimony and all of the evidence is going to be part of a building of a picture of whether it goes to show that what he was doing was bigger than just, one person deciding he was going to get his jollies.
Yeah. By the way, neither here nor there. John hasn't been on the show, so he doesn't know that I go off on weird tangents at times, but I was just reading a fascinating story. Mr. Beast just hit 400 million subscribers. The guy has, and I'm not jealous at all, he has more subscribers than there are Americans. He started John Day, you talked about law school 30 years ago. He started making YouTube videos at 14. He's 28, John Day, and I think he's making about $300-400 million a year off of YouTube with that sort of subscribership. Space Coast weighing in on the West Coast that he is cringe as you know what. John Day, are you losing faith in humanity? The days of working at General Electric for 35, 40 years or being a trial attorney might be coming to a screeching halt. I read that there's a new study that a lot of kids who are, under the age of 21 are making more money than their parents are making in a week because of the way, these social media platforms are constructed. Is everything just basically a moot point because society is going to destroy itself, John?
No, it's not. I refuse to buy that. I just don't believe it. I think, things have a way of working themselves out that may seem simplistic and naive, but I'm not gonna go down that dark path.
Oh, John, I love it. Let me just add on to that for 1 minute. Joe Potuto, what I found most interesting is he was interviewed and he said something to the effect of, I have no life. I have no work-life balance. Every penny I make, I put back into my videos, and I don't recommend this lifestyle to anyone. And he's basically, coming in or cornering the $1 billion mark at 28 years old. Joe Potuto, I don't know, what words of wisdom do you have? Because here's a guy that could literally retire for many generations. His family never has to work again for the next probably 50 generations. And he says, don't do what I'm doing. I'm miserable. Your thoughts on that?
I would tell him, stop. I mean, it's pretty easy.
Did he say that?
Yeah, sorry, excuse me. Go ahead, John.
Sorry, I apologize. Did he say that from Four Seasons in Mexico? I mean,
I don't even think he has a house. I really don't. He's kind of like this Elon Musk. I think he just literally is all over. I saw another interview. I'm just fascinated by this guy for some reason. I don't know much about him, but no, he didn't say it from Four Seasons. He did say that when he started to make money, by the way, he said no one watched his videos, not one, he had no traction for the first 7 years. And then it just like blew up. But when you think that he's got more subscribers literally than there are people in America, which is just crazy. But no, the answer is, I don't even think he has a home. He said he started to buy fancy clothes and watches and had no interest in it and returned them and just wears his ratty old clothes.
So, Joel, why would you envy him at all? He's got billions and he's doing nothing with them. It's like having a pile of paper in his house.
He's kind of like the Edward R. Murrow of the digital age, I guess, as Edward R. Murrow. I'm not saying I'm jealous. I'm just, would I like 400 million subscribers? No, it'd be a lot of work, it'd be a lot of pressure. But maybe I'll take 350 million. How about that? Okay, back to Diddy here. So John Day, we got Jane Doe. That's hard to say. John Day and Jane Doe. So Jane Doe's coming up. We have one missing witness that's not going to appear. Does that hinder the case that there's, I think people, again, I've said this before, conflated this with some of these civil cases and thought we were going to hear from, some of these men that have hurled accusations and filed suits, some of these other women, but it is essentially like basically 3 victims, I believe, who are coming forward. Is that enough?
Yeah, it's enough. The government's keeping it short, simple, and compelling. They've got, women who, whatever you think at the end of the day of the testimony, it's very compelling to have victims and people who are witnesses to this. It's hard to talk about. Look, they're not happy and comfortable on the stand, and that's clear. Look, as a defense lawyer, you're trying to get into the motivations, but any juror in this case can see with their own eyes the demeanor of these reluctant witnesses, and it establishes in their minds, I think, the credibility of what they're saying, because they don't want to be there. They would rather be anyplace else, and the government is keeping this very focused on the abuse, on what they say is the evil, what they say is the predatory nature of this, and they don't want to get distracted with a number of other witnesses, victims, and claims.
Yeah, and I would add to that, the government, I'm sure, is putting on the strongest witnesses they have that are available to come. And these witnesses have the issues that Lauren talked about, that they had the push-pull relationship because of the abuse. It's unlikely that anyone coming later would have stronger testimony or wouldn't have the same other negatives that the defense could make use of. And I don't see that anybody, I'd be very surprised to hear that anyone who's been watching this trial would believe that they needed to hear more evidence of the type of abuse to conclude that there was abuse, to conclude these things were happening. So I don't see, usually, and I agree with John completely, particularly on the prosecution side, you want to keep it as simple as possible. You don't want to confuse it.
Yeah. John Day is in New Mexico. Someone's asking me. And as a reporter, Joe, that we started covering Lori #1, she says we should cover the final trial. What are your thoughts on trial #3, Joe Potuto? Would you want to be a part of that?
I would do it. My thoughts on trial #3 were my thoughts on trial #2. I understand you've got other victims and you want to vindicate for their families and give them a chance to feel that their family member, or in this trial, the brother-in-law who wasn't killed, or the nephew-in-law that wasn't killed, a chance to see justice happen in their case. I understand that fully, but boy, there's a lot of money and a lot of resources going into doing these trials with someone who's already been convicted and is going to spend the rest of her life in jail. So that's my general feel about the trials. I'm not someone who likes to watch, roadkill on the road, but I must confess that on some of these trials, I do get a morbid fascination in watching it, and that one at least doesn't have for me, the kind of the Madeline Soto trial that the abuser there would have. That one I think is going to be very hard to sit through. Lori's, I think, is going to be to some extent a sideshow. As I say, I watched yesterday the Friday stuff, and she wasn't a sideshow on the second trial, but looks like this time she feels she's just going to go at it.
Yeah. John Day, just a little more housekeeping, then we'll get some final thoughts here. But there's a guy named Eddie Garcia that's going to testify tomorrow under immunity. He is a former security guy at the Intercontinental Century City, which is where this video was taken of Cassie being beaten. How come he is under immunity? Is there an advantage, a disadvantage? Explain that if you
Yeah, that's a good question. It's so here's a guy who they obviously thought there was some concern about his behavior, his activities, his involvement. And if you're the government and you're bringing in a witness who is under an immunity agreement, you're giving the jury a signal that this guy ought to be believed because he's coming in here, reluctantly, but we brought him in here. He's not going to be pursued for whatever this was, whatever the issue was. And so it's a bit of a win for the government, but it's an interesting situation. It's pretty unusual to have someone who is, his role in this thing, security at the hotel, coming in to testify. He's not a, he's not a co-defendant. He's not a snitch. He's not an informant. I mean, he's someone who had something to lose. But he's getting the benefit of this deal, and so the jury should be paying attention.
Yeah. So Joe Potuto, help us understand this. The government, the prosecution always says it's going to be longer than it is. Well, the prosecution said, the judge said, hey, this trial is going to take till July 4th, and it's like June, whatever it is, 2nd or 3rd today. The government did come out and say, hey, we're going to be 1 week shorter than we thought. They're saying they'll be done next week. I think that they're going to be done sooner than the end of next week, possibly this week. But then the defense conversely said, we didn't anticipate some of the things the government was doing or did, and we're going to go a little bit longer. If you had to guess, what is it that the government did that the defense wasn't anticipating or did not expect that is now going to make the defense case in chief a little bit longer than they previously had anticipated?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can guess. I saw that comment and I thought a little about it, and I can't say that I watched every minute of this case. I didn't, but I didn't see anything that should have come as any kind of a surprise to the defense that would lead them to say it's going to take them longer now to put on their case. I wouldn't even want to try to guess. I have a couple of ideas, but I don't think they're worth even saying out loud.
There you go. And John Day, to you, before we get final thoughts here, when the defense brings its case in chief, who do they have to put on the stand? I mean, I don't think they're going to find someone who's going to say none of this happened, that anyone is going to find, too credible. So who do they need?
Yeah, they're just going to chip away at the credibility of the government witnesses. They're going to be trying to, they're going second, so they get the benefit of sort of immediacy. The government's put on its case. Now this is our case. A few witnesses who are going to say, these people are not credible. Try to refocus the jury on the idea that all these positive communications from Cassie and others after these horrible facts. Like, what does that tell you? I mean, does that establish enough reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors? And they've just got to kind of reinforce the idea that you heard the government's case, just don't buy it. There's a lot of holes in there, and there's a lot of problems with the credibility.
Yeah. And Joe Potuto, final question before we get final thought. Jane Doe, woman who's going to testify, is that a risk for the government? Because you've had pretty good, victims of Sean Combs today. And what if, Jane Doe gets up there and says something or does something or acts in a way that the jurors now question her, therefore questioning the previous two witnesses? Is that a concern for the government going into this?
Well, I don't think at this point it would be. They sat down before the trial to decide how much evidence they needed and from whom, what sort of corroboration they needed, who would be credible, how to present this case and in what order. And I don't see that anything that they did up until this point, of course, I don't know what their strategy was, would have demonstrated to them that the case is much stronger than they thought it would be at this point, and therefore they don't need the last witness. I think they're going to go with the strategy they had at the outside. This last witness will testify. They've already assessed what her strengths are and where the defense is going to be able to get at her and cross, and they thought she was worth putting on. And as I say, I don't see any reason why they would have changed their mind now.
John Day's got a voice for voiceovers and a face for TV. This guy's a good-looking, handsome gentleman. John Day, your final thoughts here. You can react to my statement, but is Diddy going to be convicted here? Or is he going to walk and shock the world?
Boy, I stopped predicting after losing a number of jury trials, I stopped predicting what jurors are going to do. I mean, they can do anything. I think my sense is that he's going to go down on some of these charges. But going back to Lauren and her ability to sense, to be in the courtroom, to be in the overflow room, I would love to see the faces of these jurors. I think it's 8 men, 4 women. I mean, when you're in the courtroom as a attorney doing a trial, you get that daily dose of what the jurors' reactions are, and that's so important. And that's what we can't see, obviously, on camera. But I would love to be in there every day and watch those expressions on those jurors, because that's how I would be able to tell, at least to the extent I can, what's going to happen.
Yeah, apologies on my end tonight for the disaster that is the technical side, because unable to get in the studio. We've got storms here in Miami. Joe Potuto, coming to us from the great state of New Jersey, our home state, my home state and Joe's home state. So, Joe Potuto, do you have faith in the jury system here? Do you think that these women are going to get justice, or is the celebrity of Sean Diddy Combs going to be the X factor that has him walk out of court a free man? And I think if he does, there's no doubt this type of behavior is going to continue, because I think he's going to feel like he's untouchable, which is a very scary thought. So, Joe Potuto, how do you see the outcome of this case?
Well, it's a little hard because we didn't have the cameras in the courtroom, so you didn't get to hear the witnesses themselves. And it's different to read a cold transcript or to have somebody report on what was said or done in court. And Joe, you did a great job with it, and really an amazing job, but it's still different from actually hearing it all oneself. I think the evidence is so terrible. I mean, I remember one question of Cassie when the evidence was it one of the male sex workers or Diddy himself who was urinating on her, and she was getting questions on cross about, and she said, nobody would want anybody to pee on me. I mean, that sort of evidence, at least for the non-RICO charges, I think is really powerful and compelling. And so I would be really surprised if there's an acquittal. I'd actually be surprised if there's a hung jury. I do think that celebrities go in a lot of trials with some advantage because people think they know them and people think they like them, or feel that they like them. But boy, I think the evidence in this case would have overwhelmed anybody who started out saying, I really like, Sean Diddy, and I think he's a really great guy.
Yeah, 100%. I think the sex trafficking, and I've talked to enough attorneys who think that the government has already proven its case there. The RICO, I think, is nebulous and kind of hard for a lot of people to understand. Because of what I do now, I've talked to a bunch of former inmates, and they say that Diddy's future is not very bright. If he's convicted and he goes into the prison system, despite his celebrity and despite his power, every one of those inmates has a mother who was a woman, and it's going to be a long, long road for Sean Diddy Combs in prison. The couple inmates I talked to, former inmates, say that there will be a hit out on him, and he may not be around very long. So if I'm Sean Diddy Combs, I'm definitely nervous. The government is pretty powerful. Their conviction rate is 99%. And I think it's going to be a tough road ahead for Sean Diddy Combs. And after hearing what he did to these women, maybe that's not a bad thing. John Day, I apologize for the technical issues. Have a safe trip to New York. Let us know if you get in there.
Will do.
And Joe Potuto, thank you. And John, I ask everybody, so I put them on the spot. Will you come back on as a guest?
Happy to. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, would love to have you back, and appreciate you both here. Have a great night. Love you, America. I'll be back with an update tomorrow at 12:45 about the Diddy trial, and then we'll let you know the shows the rest of the week. Maybe we cover Lori Vallow wheeling herself into court. We will see. Love you, America. Guest, stick around 1 second. We'll see you tomorrow.